Hello everyone, welcome to another live. I'm Alicia, a master trainer on the Stretch It app. And if it's your first time joining one of our lives, we hold one every Sunday, 1 p.m., diving deeper into various flexibility training topics. And today we are working on the splits progression path. In other words, just working on how we can improve our splits training to simplify it. A few announcements. If you would like a free class, all you need to do is direct message Stretch It app, not comment on the live, but after you finish watching the live, because I would love for you to stay for the entire session, you go over to our DMs, you message us the word live, L-I-V-E in caps, and we'll send you that free class right away. Also, we have our flexibility boot camp starting tomorrow. And the global Stretch It competition is running, because it started last weekend, from May 5th to June 5th. So it is a month long. So if you're on the app, it will be a blast for you to participate. And let us know if you are. And before I started the live, again, splits progression path, I wanted to open the session by asking everybody, how are you doing in your splits training? If you are training splits, this is not to force you to train splits if you feel like you don't need them. But if you are training splits, if you are on the app, or you're just training them on your own, I would love to know where you are with that, so I can get a better idea of what to focus on today. Of course, I can make general recommendations as to what I see are typical challenges people run into progressing their splits. I think one of the main obstacles is to access their hip extension for the back leg. Once you discover how large of a role your hip extension plays in front splits, I think your training becomes more streamlined and you become more successful in getting your hips lower without asking too much from your front leg, specifically the hamstrings, right? Because to get low, yes, you can rotate your pelvis in order to get lower, because now you're asking more from your front leg than you are from your back leg. But when you actually square out your pelvis, you might discover that your split lifts a little higher because it has been revealed that your hip extension isn't great. Or maybe you haven't connected to your hip extension and you just feel your low back extend and not the actual hip. From there, if you do have a front split, the natural progression is to then work on your oversplit by either elevating your front leg, your back leg, or both legs. Usually one would elevate the front leg first, but I think it's interesting when they start with the back leg, because actually it makes the front leg a little easier, because you are still training your pelvis to be square and to now express more extension, because you are training on a deficit, meaning you're making the floor higher or making the floor lower, however you want to understand it, right? But I'm just waiting until anyone drops questions in the comments about split progressions and how we can improve. If not, I'll be more than happy to just start it and we could get rolling. I'm sure I have my blocks ready just in case. Now, let me demonstrate what I was talking about. Hold on one second. Bloop, bloop. Where if you wanted to check your splits progress and people get anxious about seeing how low they are getting to the floor, what usually happens is that they'll extend the front leg, but then they'll start to turn out the back leg and see, yeah, look how low I am. But if we actually refine the positioning, you might discover that you're higher than what you think. And that's because when you train your pelvis to actually be square, you then have to ask more of your back hip to extend and not rotate and extend. there is some rotation there, but not to the degree where you originally demonstrated by rotating your hips completely to the side in order to get lower. So I think the first progression to make in your splits training is to highlight effective hip extension training and improving that range of motion. And the first part is to actually connect to what your hip extension is. And that's to work, in my opinion, in 90-90, where you make a 90-90 angle with your legs and you punch your back hip forward in trying to connect with your psoas so that you don't have to worry about your low spine in this position because your pelvis isn't as low. If you could lift it a little higher, you can now isolate it where you're focusing and successfully targeting your psoas. Okay? You can hold that anywhere from, if you're just starting, 30 seconds might feel like a long time, right? So as a beginner, you could start that stretch out at 30 seconds, but I will eventually work up to a 2-minute hold. And if that means you have to hold on to something, then you can add more stability so that you feel comfortable holding that position for that longer bout of time. Excuse me. Now, if you wanted to progress into a lower lunge variation, the key is that you carry that same connection that you establish in your 90-90 position, that you carry that into your low lunge, where you don't just want to arch your back in order to get lower. You want to truly be a little more strict with accessing this hip extension and keeping your torso more upright, right? We don't want it to collapse onto the front thigh, and this is where I would recommend blocks encouraging an more upright position so you could place more weight here on the back hip and train that hip extension to go lower, right? You could also add a side bend, which is killer, while extending the hip. Now, one of my favorite hip extension exercises is the beloved, being sarcastic here, wall or couch stretch. I'm going to show you on the wall where, ow, that hurt, where you place a block near it. Now, this is a little more advanced because you then have to hold your foot or ankle in an extended position, which can be tough. So you most certainly can do this over your couch and allow your ankle to flex so your foot and ankle are more comfortable while you torture your hip. So the first step is to place your knee on the block, foot against the wall. Step opposite foot forward, and now try to press your hip forward and lean back. This is more intense because you're now including more quadricep due to the knee's higher degree of knee bend, right? So it's flexed more. It's going to feel a lot more intense. Your quadriceps and psoas, they are involved. They love to be together, right? So now you're including both, and it's going to feel a lot more intense. If you haven't done this stretch before, the farther away you walk the block, the easier it is. Naturally, the more degree of knee bend you have, the tougher it will feel. And it will feel especially tough to get this hip crease as flat as possible. And you just have to stay. You could also hold on to something. I have my little chair here. So if you want to hold on to it just so you don't have to worry about the sensation and holding your body up, you can have something nearby and try to get that hip as forward as possible. And of course, the next step is to drop into variation number 2 in holding your body up, right? That's one of my most favorite progressions for front splits. The wall forces your hips to be square. And it also teaches how to feel, or how your hips feel in a square split, and the role your psoas plays in that front split. The reason square hips are important is, yes, it leads to less injury for the front leg, right? But the injury risk is still present in everything you do. No matter what, if it's physically required, you are putting yourself at risk. I'm just going to put that out there, right? But from the context of front split training, yes, it does help lessen the risk of you pulling your hamstrings of the front leg, because now we're teaching our pelvis to be square when trying to get our front splits lower. However, the second reason why it's important to train square is because that is your foundation for adding a deeper back bend on your split. It will be quite difficult for you to back bend in a split if your pelvis is rotated to a high degree. You won't be able to back bend successfully. It will be more like a side bend, back bend hybrid, which isn't great, because over time, it's like that crunchy side bend, back bend position is going to feel terrible. A more even back bend is achievable and is, what's the word I want to look for? Achievable, yes, but more likely to happen if your pelvis is square, if your hips are square. It's kind of like in a low lunge, right? So if I were to come back into this low lunge position, but I turn out my hip, it's hard to back bend if my hip is turned out. But if I get into a true hip extension when my pelvis is square, a lot easier to back bend with the square hip, because naturally, because of your hip joint, if your hip joint is more neutral, it can express more hip extension. If it's a little rotated, it might be limited in how much extension it can express because of its rotated position. So this is just being more efficient in our joint setup, so we don't have to make them work harder than necessary, right? Because this is already hard to begin with, so we don't want to ask it for more. We want to ask how it functions well, and how well it functions, and work from that. So the next thing is, because I spoke a lot about the back leg, but you're like, what about the front leg? Well, I would continue to work on your hamstring flexibility. And one stretch in particular that I think you can eventually progress to, especially if you've been doing a lot of forward fold seated positions, if you were doing on your back hamstring stretch, a great progression for hamstring flexibility is standing variations, but single leg. So you step one leg forward, and you now try to master tilting your hip as high as possible and laying your torso down as far over that front leg as you can, right? This is a killer stretch, and especially helpful and in trying to understand the hip tilt position. The more you tilt the hip, the more hamstring you recruit, and the more you get them involved in that stretch. And that's especially helpful if you feel stuck with the front leg and you can't get it low. One of my favorites, and I'll switch legs to show you. Again, split stance. If you're here, you might have to bend the knees and work on tilting the hip higher. But if you're able to tilt your hip and keep the knee straight, killer hamstring stretch. Killer. And that for already, I mean, makes it a lot, I feel better. Especially when you want to attempt a front split. Now, again, you try to get as square as you can without opening. The opening thing, you will soon discover, doesn't feel great. It's not a stable position. And it doesn't set up well for other skills you want to layer on the split. Again, for instance, you've seen the back bend split shape where you're in the front split and you reach back to your ankle. Well, that you need a square pelvis for that, for the most part. Even if it's rotated a little bit, it's mostly neutral-ish. Okay, that's pretty much what you need to achieve that specific skill. Also, back knee bend. This one too. You could also use to work on your back split, or front split, I should say, the pigeon pose, where a lot of people have a hard time being upright because this is a twofold stretch. You are addressing the external rotation of your front hip, right? And there's some flexion here as well. But now, when you want to come up and add these variations, right? Your hip has to be here. And you have to be mostly upright. But that requires a high degree of hip extension, which people automatically feel in their low back and they might cramp. Because it's tough to lift your torso as high as you can in pigeon. Again, you need a lot of hip extension and a great opportunity to work on that without worrying about your front leg being straight. You're still getting a killer butt stretch in your front hip, but you don't have to worry so much about the hamstrings as you do if you wanted to train front splits or at least your back hip extension and not keep your front leg straight, right? So that is the next step. Now, even though the thumbnail shows me doing a front split, you can still apply this to your middle split training. And middle split training can be a little more tricky because of the hips requirement to abduct and also rotate, especially in straddle, right? So with the legs out in front of you, getting your body as low as possible, inner thigh, hamstrings as well, and tush, right, are involved. To progress that really is about mastering the pelvic tilt. If you feel your legs are not wide and you're rounding forward and you can't tilt, I would bend the knees and try to tilt from there, or sit on a block and try to at least get your pelvis to be more upright. Okay? Now for middle split training, where your legs are flipped and your entire pelvis is flipped, I would try to progress frog. And that is this guy. I know, our favorite. Boop. Where the knees are wide, body is down, and you try to not dump into it, but focus on targeting inner thighs here for frog. Now, because we have some time, I wanted to do one round of the wall stretch with everyone. If you are so inclined to participate, yay! And also, I think this is a great opportunity to feel the difference, because this stretch for me is a game changer. And I know that's not going to be the case for everybody, but I think if you try it once and then attempt your front split or even attempt a low lunge, I think you feel a difference in your depth. And also you'll feel more connected to your hip extension, your hip flexors, and not so much your low back anymore. Does that sound like a plan? Oh, apparently there's a separate app for hand gestures. Who knew? I can't keep up with the technology, family. There's so many changes constantly being made. All right, everyone. So if you want to join, I suggest blocks, but if you don't have blocks, you most certainly can be creative with your props. Knee on the block, foot on the wall. I'm going to place my block a little closer. Step forward and try to get that hip as forward as you can. And try to get your back as close to the wall as you can. And again, if this is not comfortable for you, I would suggest you do this on the couch. You could also reach overhead as you try to extend the hip. You could stay more neutral. In through your nose and out through the mouth. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, to come out, hands down first, front foot back, knee down. Woo! Okay, other side. Here we go. Knee on the block, opposite foot steps forward. Try to get that hip as flat as you can. Lean back if that's available to you. Whoa. Is a tough position. You almost want to contract your tush and drive it forward. Deep breaths. We stay for 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Carefully come out. Whoop. Shoof. Now let's test it out. We'll do left foot first. Right knee back. See how upright we can stay. Nice. I feel a lot more recruitment from my back hip. Could get a little lower there. Can keep the torso more upright. Same thing on the other side. Yep. Without turning out the hip, but keeping it in that back hip extension. Woohoo! And also, we can see the front split progression. My left hamstrings have been super tight. I blame all the deadlifting. So let me take a moment here to work on that. Okay. Now, even if you don't get all the way down, you can still work on getting your back hip as square as possible and try to pour more weight into that hip extension. Yeah? I have to work on my left split for sure. And on the right, this is my Showtime side. On my right, definitely I can be more square. Or I am more square, I should say. And I could keep my hands off the ground and hold myself upright. And that's largely due to the fact that I'm on the back leg. Thank you. So those are my recommendations about how you could progress, specifically your front split. We also touched on a little bit on middle splits. but it's all about refining your technique and truly understanding the anatomy of the skill you wish to achieve. So once you establish those principles, it's a lot easier for you to then choose the exercises that will get you there. But I also like to leave some time at the end of our lives in case you had any questions that pertain to this topic. I would love to answer and help you out there. Again, if you would like a free class, direct message the Stretch It app account, the word live, L-I-V-E. Our flexibility bootcamp begins tomorrow, and the global Stretch It app competition is now running, and it concludes on June 5th. So make sure if you are a subscriber on the app that you join the fun. And then later I'll work on my left split. And if anyone wants to share if you've been working on your front split training, what you discovered, what works, what didn't work, please share. Thank you. You make it look so easy. It doesn't feel easy, but I appreciate the compliment. Sorry about the sirens. It is a beautiful day here in New York City, and it is Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day. So everyone's out and frolicking, so it's definitely a great weather day, and then it's going to rain tomorrow. So timing has been wonderful for the weekend. Don't mind me as I hang out because I did sign in late. So I wanted to reserve some extra time after the live or after the main demonstration and talk, leaving time for any questions or comments about split progression, the split progression path. I forgot the title of my own live. It happens. And if you're watching the replay, which this will be available as on the main feed. So if you're just joining, you're like, what happened? We worked on split progression. It will be on the main feed after this live concludes. So you're able to watch it from beginning to end. Yay. I was going to do a hand gesture, but I received a weird message from the app. Thank you very much. Is that it, everybody? Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join our live. It's always a pleasure. And again, if you are watching the replay, thank you for taking the time to watch the replay. Again, make sure you DM the Stretch It account, the word live, LIVE, to receive a free class on us. Flexibility Boot Camp begins tomorrow. As well, we have our Stretch It Global Competition running now through June 5th. It's always a pleasure to have everyone. Thank you again for taking the time to join our live session. We'll see you back here next Sunday. Until then, everyone, please take care.